Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to B-Ball Breakdown. I am pleased to have the pride of Evanston Township High School, Casey Johnson, the Bulls beat writer for the Chicago Tribune, on to talk playoff preview for the Bulls. Casey, glad to have you. What's going on with the Bulls these days?
Oh, just 4 regular season games left, including Friday night at the United Center against the Pistons. And like the players, beat writers are ready for the playoffs to start.
How is this seeding thing going to work? Because I feel like everyone wants to avoid the Heat if they can, but we don't know if the Heat's going to be 1 or 2. That third spot seems like either the Holy Grail or the thing no one wants.
You know, I think the Bulls have had the right approach all the way through, and it sounds cliche, but when you have a Tom Thibodeau coach team, it's how they roll. They're not focused on anything except playing good basketball and trying to win games, get the highest seed they can. They know that they're going to have to go through good opponents regardless of who they face. They're not trying to duck anybody. They're just trying to win as many games they can, and then once they get their opponent, they'll lock into preparation for that.
Well, what do you think? Are they going to end up being third, or are they going to end up being fourth? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, Toronto's obviously got an easy schedule on paper, but it seems like Toronto, you keep waiting for Toronto to stumble. I mean, you can't believe they're as good as they are, but they are. They've been this good for a long time and all season. And that said, the Bulls could have a stumble. They take a season-high 6-game winning streak into Friday night against the Pistons. So it's tough to say. I think if you're asking me for prediction, I do think Toronto will hang on to that 3 seed and the Bulls will finish 4th.
Oh, okay. Well, it sounds like we'll have a great series either way with that 4-5 matchup and throughout the playoffs. I don't know if we've ever seen a 48-win team ranked so low on offense. And what would you attribute those issues to?
They're just not very good. I mean, their issues are they don't get a lot of easy baskets until DJ Augustin came aboard, which I know has been a while. They had a ton of late shot clock situations. They, were not a very good half-court execution team. I do think over the last month or two, they've started to play better in the half-court. Tom Thibodeau has locked into a 7-man rotation with spot minutes for Tony Snell and Nazim Muhammad, and it's consistent or typical now for 6 or 7 of those guys to reach double figures. So the ball movement has been better. They have been executing better in the half-court sets, but they just don't have a lot of, break you down off the dribble kind of guys. So you need to try to get easy baskets in transition, and they haven't had a lot of those.
I was watching the OKC game, and I noticed a lot of almost Princeton feel play. It's not exactly structured that way, but Noah was working out of the high post, lots of cutters. That looked new to me. Was there a moment during the season where they kind of switched to that, or were they doing that all season long?
Well, I mean, obviously since Derek's gone down, which has now been since late November, they've run most everything through Joakim, and even more so once the Luol Deng trade happened in January. But no, I mean, they've incorporated some of that before, but they're obviously using Joakim at the high post even more now. And they've always been good at cutting, multiple cutters off the ball. And obviously Augustin has added a screen roll element that they were missing for a while until he signed. So, but they've been bad offensively all season. They've been at the bottom basically all season.
I've also noticed that with all that cutting, as they get tired and all the defense they got to play, that's what kind of breaks down for them as well. And they really don't get any of those open shots anymore that they were getting in the first half, and that becomes the issue as well. It sounds like the fatigue thing is a real concern if he's only going to play 7 guys.
Well, I mean, they've been doing it for a while, and they've been winning. I mean, the Nets and the Bulls are the 2 best teams in the Eastern Conference since January 1st. I know the playoffs go to a different level, that Miami could flip a switch, but Miami and Indiana have struggled down the stretch. So you can say the 7-man rotation tires them out. You could also say it's working. I mean, they're arguably playing the best basketball in the conference down the stretch. Between them or Brooklyn. So, these players are used to it. Jimmy Butler's been a high-minute guy since his second season in the league. And since Luol left, Jimmy's been playing even more.
So what do you think is going to happen here? Are they going to make a run to the conference finals?
Obviously, you got to wait to see who they match up with against. I do think that if they face Miami in the second round, I think that'd be an excellent series. I think it would possibly go 7, almost certainly go 6, but you have to pick the Heat in that case. Indiana is tough to figure out because they've been so good for so long, and now it just looks almost like they can't recover from the tailspin they're in. It just seems like they're a different team right now. So I do think the Bulls match up well with that. But Indiana remains a pretty good home team, and they would have home court advantage over the Bulls. So I think whoever they face, assuming they got out of the first round in that second series, would probably go a 7-game series. But you couldn't pick the Bulls as the favorite in either series.
Absolutely. Although it's funny that you can find a team that's as bad or almost as bad offensively as the Bulls when we're talking about the Pacers. But let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball, because I've been trying to give a lot of shine for Joakim Noah as a Defensive Player of the Year, primarily because everyone that talks about Hibbert and his ability to protect the rim ignores everything else that Noah does, which besides defending the rim ends up defending perimeter players and is much more active to me. Do you think that's part of the criteria for being Defensive Player of the Year, is how active you can be in the entire possession?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually that's why, I voted for perimeter players, a lot of wing players, because I think those people usually draw the best scorers and have to do the most work out on the perimeter. I'm not discounting rim protection. It's obviously critical, especially come playoff time. But I've always felt like wing players like Artest in his prime, and Bruce Bowen, guys like that have always been the ones I've gravitated towards. And that's where I would agree with you, is I think Noah's been invaluable because, he is obviously good at rim protection, but how many 6'11" guys can switch on to, wing players like he does, and Taj Gibson does as well. And it's the way that Tom Thibodeau likes to play defense, with guys being able to guard multiple positions, but it's incredibly rare for big men to be able to switch on to dynamic wing players and stay with them like Joakim and Taj can do.
DJ Augustin for the Pacers did not look like an NBA player in the playoffs last year. I was sort of wondering how he was even out there and why they were throwing him out there. He shows up in Chicago as, I don't even think anybody was, they weren't going to send a limo to pick him up at the airport. Can you explain how he's become this dynamic, sort of combo guard?
Well, I can partially explain it and then partially not explain it, because I was told, from people that I trust, that he wasn't, he was basically done. And this is people that, associated with the league. They just thought he was done. Obviously didn't have a very good year last year in Indiana and then fallen out of the rotation in Toronto. And, these are people that said that he just wasn't the same player. But then you can look back to those Charlotte days, and granted, those were horrifically bad Bobcats teams playing in the NBA wasteland. But, I mean, he was showing elements of things you need to succeed in this league. Very good in the screen roll, high three-point percentage. His rookie year, he shot 43% from three with a lot of attempts. So I know somebody has to score on a bad team, but he had done it at this level. And, we've heard ad nauseum from Tom Thibodeau, and it is true. The Bulls had a need, and DJ had a need, and they found the perfect marriage. It's one of those classic examples of opportunity and situation and a player taking advantage of it. And he's just been, a lot of people have said, players, teammates, he's been a season saver for the Bulls, and I would tend to agree.
Well, you've been around for a long time, and your ear is perennially to the ground. What do you hear about the possibilities of signing any, big free agents in the offseason for the Bulls?
Well, I mean, it's obviously a little speculative at this point, given that you don't fully know what their cap situation is going to be. I mean, it does look like they're going to use the amnesty provision on Carlos Boozer, but that's not 1,000% guaranteed. It does look like they're going to get 2 first-round picks, acquiring Charlotte's pick in the Tyrese Thomas trade. So you can guesstimate, if they do get 2 first-round picks and use the amnesty provision on Boozer, and the cap is in the low 60s. Like a $10 to $12 million range. That's obviously not enough to get Melo, but you can get creative. They've signed some guys here late season, Mike James and Ronnie Brewer, that have second-year non-guarantees. That to me is a signal that they're going to at least explore and exhaust every big-name possibility to see if they can get in on some sign-and-trade situations. Guys like, obviously Carmelo. They've been linked to Pau Gasol in the past, who's also going to be a free agent this summer. So I do think that their number one option is to try to land a big name star via trade. And if that does not work, then they would explore obviously bringing Mirotic over from Spain. And then in lieu of neither of those happening, then you've got $10 to $12 million left on spare parts. You obviously need a backup point guard, whether they re-sign Heinrich or Augustin. you need a backup big man, because if Boozer's gone and Nazem Muhammad will definitely be gone, you're thin up front. So it's going to be a very, very fluid and busy and important off season for the Bulls.
Wow. Is Nazem Muhammad gone? Is that going to be a big headline I could use, or is that?
I'm not trying to throw dirt on Nazem's grave. I mean, he's had a remarkable career, but I would just assume he won't be back with the Bulls. Whether or not he's still in the league, I don't know. He's been in there now 16 years. That's a long time, but he won't be back with the Bulls.
Absolutely. And from what I've seen of Mirotic, I think that he's a very viable player that will help them in that, I don't want to say Kukoc mode, but certainly he has some offensive talent that they would certainly need and use.
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually talked to Kukoc a couple weeks ago for a story in the Tribune about his acclimation process, and he was very good about what Mirotic is going to face and go through. Obviously, not a direct analogy, because Kukoc was joining, a championship caliber team with, basically a title or bust expectations. But he just talked about just some of the cultural things that Mirotic will encounter whenever he does decide to come over. They are obviously somewhat different players, but you're right. If Mirotic comes over, the Bulls have always needed shooting, and from all accounts, he's a very, very good stretch four shooter.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very exciting to see, and we'll have to find out what's going on. And come back on now that we got our Skype thing hooked up, and let's keep talking about this, because certainly I think that we're going to be surprised by how competitive the Eastern Conference is going to be and how much better it's gotten from the beginning of the year.
I think you're right, and now that we've got this technology master, we can do this again in the playoffs.
Absolutely. And speaking of technology, make sure that you follow Casey on Twitter, because he's got a great line into what's going on with the Bulls, up-to-the-minute stuff. And thanks for joining us. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Casey?
I'm in.